value of the homes. And then maybe house prices might drop another 10%, but you still have positive equity. Now, this it is a very serious problem because to forcefully change the terms of a contract ex post facto is actually unconstitutional, right? So how do you do it? I think it needs to be done, and I think it can be done, but it's going to be very difficult.
Now, let's go back to policy making here. You already criticized the intervention of Lehman, or the lack of intervention of Lehman. But I have the sense that the policy team was behind the curve for quite a while. No? Yes. And so this was just a final mistake. But do you think they have caught up finally?
No. Okay. No. Unfortunately, and this is why I have to confess that while I predicted that this is going to be the most serious crisis of my lifetime, the most serious crisis since the 1930s, I did not anticipate the severity of this crisis. I did not expect the system actually to melt down. That was a specific mistake of this administration, unpredictable. So, really? So it's gone much further than I thought it would, and unfortunately, the Secretary Paulson has really been consistently lagging, not recognizing the severity of the crisis, and then not taking the necessary steps. What are the necessary steps?
Pardon? What are the necessary steps now?
Well, I would say that you have got three issues that need to be resolved. One, you have to restart lending. You have to recapitalize the banks and actually encourage them to lend. Now, I put forward a scheme for doing it, and to some extent, he actually moved over because I said that you have to inject equity rather than take off the bad loans, because equity has 12 times the impact.
Unless you have a debt overhang, unless you have a debt overhang, which is part of the problem, no? Because you inject equity and you're essentially just increasing the value of the long-term debt. So that's the part of the issue.
Yeah, but you can then see my proposal was to inject equity in the form of a convertible bond with a low coupon, which was correct, 5%, because you don't want to impair their ability to earn, but make the bonds convertible, which dilutes the existing shareholders. But you offer the rights to subscribe to the shareholders, so they are not diluted if they make up for the shortfall in the equity. And the rights would be tradable. If they don't have money, I will buy some and I'll subscribe. So I think they would have been, probably would have been subscribed by the market, because it would have been, and if not, the Treasury would subscribe. So the Treasury would act as an underwriter. Mm-hmm. That would have been the right thing. Then, and it would have been compulsory in the sense that the bank examiners would tell the Treasury how much additional equity is needed to bring them up to the 8% minimum capital requirement. Then I would lower the minimum capital requirement to 6%. So they are free to lend. Mm-hmm. And then they would want to put the capital to use, and they would start competing for loans. So you'd reopen the banking system.
The Nordics did something like this.
They did, but you wouldn't have had to nationalize it, because
Yes,
I think that the shareholders would have put up the money. So that's number one. Number two, you have to solve you have to prevent housing prices from overshooting on the downside, the way they overshot on the upside. Therefore, you have to reduce foreclosures to a minimum, to restrict the supply.
This is with your mortgage measure.
This is the mortgage reorganization. And there I propose this Danish system and so on. And the third is to stabilize the global economy and to enable countries which are following or have followed sound macro policies, their finances are sound, like, let's say, Brazil, to allow them to run fiscal deficit, very nice, old Keynesian, anti-cyclical domestic stimulation, because that's the only way that you can avoid a worldwide depression. So those are the three, now, these are the three elements that need to be put together.
So the TARP is not needed?
No, the TARP would be used for the equity injection.
Oh, I see.
The 700 billion would be more than enough.
So you're not worried about the periphery of the financial system within the U.S., hedge funds?
No, I think that probably what would happen, what will happen anyhow, is that the so-called shadow banking will be absorbed by deposit banking. The investment banking model is not sustainable. So effectively, it would be consolidated in regulated banking companies. And the hedge fund industry is going to go through a shakeout. It's going to, I think, in my estimation, will be reduced in size by anywhere between half and 2/3.
So you have us out of the crisis. How do we? Now you have us out of the crisis.
Yeah.
So how do we fix the system so we don't get into the next one? Or is reflexivity something that?
I think you'll always have reflexivity, and you'll
so
always
how do we tame it?
And markets will always be unpredictable, and you will always have a tendency towards bubble formation. However, the regulators have to accept responsibility for preventing bubbles from growing too big. That would require the use of judgment. And they're bound to get it wrong. It's inevitable because they are also human. But they would get feedback from the market so they could correct their mistakes. So right now, the regulators have, the authorities have expressly rejected responsibility for dealing with asset bubbles, saying we don't have enough instruments. And they are right, because using merely monetary tools.
With one caveat, though, I was in one of these meetings. There was an asymmetry. They thought they had no tools to deal with this ex ante, which is right, monetary policy at least, but they also thought they had the tools to deal with this ex post after the crisis. And now they have learned that they don't.
In other words, instead of waiting for it to blow up and then picking up the pieces, they have actually got to prevent it from growing too big.
But I'm saying they're going to be more willing to listen to that now because
I think so. I think there is a discussion now. But you see, in order to deal with asset bubbles, you can't deal with them with monetary tools alone. Just controlling interest rates is not enough, because credit and money don't go hand in hand. In other words, monetarism is also a false doctrine, because markets do have moods, And with the same money supply, you can have a credit expansion or credit contraction.
So you want them to intervene on margin requirements?
So you have to, not only do you have to employ them more actively, but you also